Welcome again to the National Land Realty Podcast. This is episode 103. And before we jump in, podcast at nationalland.com. Email us with your questions, comments, concerns, topics you would like us to cover, or guests that you would like us to talk to. Remember, email podcast at nationalland.com, and we will respond to you and hopefully get some ideas for new content to get your way. Now let's jump in. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I will be your host for the 103rd time here. So let's jump into the topic at hand. Every outdoor enthusiast has probably dreamed at some point of making a career guiding adventurers in the outdoors. For me, it happens every single season for hunting season, and probably every time I go fishing on the drive home, it at least crosses your mind once that, man, it would be cool to do this for a living. Now, some of you have looked into this, and just not jumped ship. Some of you have never looked into it, and it just comes up from time to time. Now, we are talking to somebody here today that did that. We're talking to Taylor Heithold, who currently works in South Carolina and Georgia for National Land Realty doing land sales. Now, Taylor spent the last decade of his life working as a guide all around the United States. He took the route of first going to guide school and then traveling with the seasons around the country. Taylor is now putting his experience to use helping others buy and sell land. This is Taylor's journey from guide to land sales. Now sit back and enjoy. Okay, so I am sitting here today with Taylor Heithold, and Taylor's a newer agent. You just kind of started out, like you just finished boot camp, you said, in March?
Yep, end of March.
End of March. But Taylor has a unique background that we want to dive into a little bit here that drove him into land sales that's perfectly leverageable. And you started out doing years as a guide. And so Taylor, if you can, just walk everybody kind of through what brought you into a career as a hunting guide and sort of what that journey looked like. And we're going to dive in a little bit for sure, but just give us like an overhead view.
So I've always loved the outdoors growing up, shooting trap, bird hunting with my dad. Grew up in North Carolina, so spent a lot of time on the Pamlico Sound, duck hunting. I know we've got some agents out there that do a lot of waterfowl hunting. So I went to NC State. Once I graduated from NC State, I wanted to follow my passion and get into guiding bird hunts, waterfowl hunts. So I had some friends out there that already guided in South Dakota, and right when I graduated, I moved out. I ended up starting in Kansas. I guided there for a year, and then my buddies that guided at a lodge in South Dakota, they had an opening and told me to come join them there, and started guiding in South Dakota. It's been close to 9 years now. Just fell in love with it. Just waterfowl hunting, bird dogs, that's my passion. So I've just kind of lived a nomadic lifestyle, hopping around, guiding all over the country. So I moved back to South Carolina recently to be close to family, and just got kind of tired of living out of a suitcase. So,
well, okay, so I think it's a great conversation to have, because I can speak firsthand. Anybody who spends any time in the outdoors and gets that passion for, we'll say, hunting, fishing, hiking, horses, or camping, or any of that, every single person who has gotten into those kind of things wonders about guiding at some point. I mean, even at one point, my wife was hitting me up and saying, like, well, what if we started, like, guiding a little bit and we could just do it? I'm like, that's not something you run as a side hustle. Like, it's a lifestyle. And I think everybody that gets into the outdoors, it runs across their mind, probably at least, I want to say once, but I'm going to say more like a dozen times. And so tell me sort of how you got into it and what was your gateway into getting into guiding?
I've always just all I think about is hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors. So like I've always wanted to work a job that I enjoyed. And, I know a lot of people that just do work jobs that they just really don't enjoy. And, life's short. So I wanted to do something I had a passion for. And I already had friends that, worked at the lodge there and saw like, kind of
Oh,
what
so
they were
you had
doing.
buddies that went over to the lodge that you're talking about and were already kind of embedded.
Yeah, they were already working in South Dakota at the lodge. It's Double P Ranch, just a top of the line lodge. We always joke around. It's like a 5-star restaurant with pheasant hunting because I mean, really nice lodge, 5-star accommodations. The chefs there are just unbelievable. Like nobody ever goes there and loses weight. So
Right. Well, and you mentioned too, like you went to a guiding school, which I mean, most guides have to get certified on some level or take a course or do things like that. There are guiding outfits. Well, actually, most of them to get a license to guide, you've got to go through some kind of credentials. But tell us, how did you find a guide school, and were you referred to it, or what was that like?
so the other guys I guide with in South Dakota, they had been at it. They'd been guiding 3 or 4 years before I graduated college and started getting into it. But so they went to a guide school in Colorado. I think it's like the Colorado Outdoor Adventure School. And it's not like something you have to do to become a guide, but it really helps get your foot in the door at a lot of these places. Um, and I just started researching it. And right when I had graduated during the summer, I went to guide school and I found this guide school in Montana called Swan Mountain Wilderness Guide School. And I just decided to go for it. And so, I mean, I've always loved Montana. And so that's why I chose that guide school. But right near Glacier, Swan Mountain, just a beautiful area. I almost moved out there when I finished guide school. But
I don't blame you. That's that gorgeous, gorgeous area.
oh,
What
yeah.
is it? So you already had been to college, finished that up, and then you go to guide school. What's the experience like going from it? I mean, especially like you know you're back east, like what is it like going from that area to Montana? And then what is it like just coming from an academic background and then going into, guide training, like an actual curriculum?
Yeah. So it's real different in Montana. I was at NC State in Raleigh, big city. Yeah, I'm definitely not a city guy, but just once I got out there to Montana, I was like, man, I've got to live somewhere like this, like away from the city. I just love the outdoors and there's so much to do. Um, so it was definitely a big change. I graduated in finance, which, if I could go back in time, I probably would have done something different. But I just I wanted to have a career where I wasn't stuck in an office all day. I just love, being in the outdoors, meeting people. And so the guide school I went to was kind of geared more towards big game, but it, relates to all type of guiding. But I originally had thought about guiding elk hunts. So, and deer hunts but I mean, bird hunting's really always been my passion. Like growing up on the East Coast, we've got deer hunting, we've got small whitetails though, compared to what you guys have out there. And so to have any good duck hunting and on the East Coast, you really got to go to the coast. I mean, the central part of North Carolina and Raleigh, where I grew up hunting, and or near Charlotte area, there's not very good duck hunting. I mean, you might kill a limit of 3 wood ducks, and that's going to be you're going to call that a good hunt, and you're
Yeah, yeah.
competing 100 other hunters out there. Where you go to the Midwest or somewhere, you just get spoiled. It's unbelievable hunting out there, and the lack. I mean, there's so much public land, and there's really not a lot of other public hunters. I mean, when North Carolina, I was getting in there at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Me and my buddies would camp out, sleep there. And then you have like guys coming in 30 minutes before shooting time, setting up, 100 yards from you. where you go to the Midwest and like you just find these honey holes, walk right in. You don't even hear any other gunshots around you. It's awesome out there.
So I want to kind of steer you back into the guide training. What are the courses like? Like what's a day in the life of hunting guide school?
So since it was kind of geared more towards like the big game stuff, we learned, we had a horse corral, we had mules and horses, and we'd get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, sun hadn't even come up yet. And we're out there catching horses, and uh, we pick out a horse. We learn how to get them all saddled up. Um, we'd go on a full day trip to the upper camp. We had an upper camp that was 10, 12 hours away. So we'd be horseback riding all day. Just we learned how to shoe a horse. Every day was different there.
I was just gonna ask that exactly. So you learned farrier stuff along the way, and like how to deal with the hooves, or did they start you like a 101 level? Like, do you start out learning, okay, like this is how you track, or do they assume that everybody already knows the kind of the basics?
They start out at a 101 level. Now there was some other classes once this basic guide school ended that you could get into, like concentrate on more advanced stuff. But it just kind of gave you like a base. Like we learned how to a lot of packing, because if you're, guiding elk hunts, mule deer hunts, whatever it is, you're gonna have mules where you have to learn all these different hitches. Just learned a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so how long did the full kind of school go?
Our school was 6 weeks, so 6 weeks long.
So this is just intensive. Like you're there and they knock it out. Like because I was thinking like, is it 6 months? Is it like? But it's 6 weeks. Is like real quick. Is it? Do they teach you much on the customer service side, like how to deal with people?
They do.
Do they?
And how to deal with certain situations. They kind of deter a lot of people because, as a guide, you're in a lot of guiding situations, you're really not going to make a lot of money, but you're doing what you love.
Yeah.
So they tell you up front, like if you're guiding elk hunts, you typically make this much per day, although, you could get a big tip or you could not. But it kind of deterred a lot of people, really. Out of my guide school, we had probably 15 people there. I only know of 2 other guys that guided after guide school. So that was
I think that's education in general for a lot of fields. Like you spoke to that with finance as well. And like, I mean, I was in college originally for biology and stuff like that, and ended up going into graphic design because I realized I was always been good at art, but then I looked at the income for art majors and it's like, no.
Yeah.
That's that was always a thing. So you go through this, you do 6 weeks of intensive training, and you kind of learn the ins and outs of just it's a service field, right? Like you learn how to give service and you learn how to solve problems, and then you go in and you start doing hunt guiding, which you said, right, like you focused on birds. Was it waterfowl or upland as well?
So our bread and butter is pheasant hunting.
Okay.
But it offer waterfowl hunts, and whitetail hunts. So
Gotcha. And so your focus was pheasants?
Pheasants was my focus. Yeah. I had 4 bird dogs. Now I have 3. I've got Drothars. I know a few of the other National Land guys are Drothar guys. But
yeah, there's a few of those. It's like you get one and like you're in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like a social club almost, but yeah, they're, bird hunting's my passion, waterfowl hunting. We do offer whitetail hunts, walleye fishing. When I first started guiding there, we guided a little bit of everything. Now, we guided pheasant hunting every day, but a lot of the groups would kind of add on a afternoon walleye or, out there, if you have like a dry mallard feed, you can get a, afternoon duck hunt in, or you could do a morning duck hunt and an afternoon pheasant hunt. So But the whitetail hunting out there it's awesome. I mean, a lot of people, look at Kansas, Illinois, Iowa, for big whitetails, but South Dakota is kind of a hidden gem in that department.
So what's it like going through? You do your 6 weeks of training for guiding, and so like you said, a lot of it's big game focus, but it's learning how to work with people, with firearms, with setting up the hunt and stuff like that. What is it like going from liking the outdoors to going to a class and coming out and then getting your first client? What's that experience like?
Uh, it's a good feeling, when you're, living your dream. And um, when when I started guiding in Kansas, they already have all of the customers booked up and everything. And, the lodge manager would kind of assign us a group each day. And, just to be doing that for a living, making money, I mean, couldn't ask for much better.
What's it like getting your first difficult client?
Um, it's, you're still out there having fun out in the outdoors, not too, I've definitely had some difficult situations. You do what you can. One in particular in Kansas, we had sometimes we'll have these smaller groups and we tell them when they book that, you know, we have a limited amount of guides. So we might have to group you guys up together and just make sure they're okay with that. And a lot of them, they'll tell you they're okay with that. And some of these guys bring their own bird dogs. So I had two small groups, and each group had their own dogs with them. So they didn't want me to run my dogs at all. And then you have the situation where one guy's dog goes on point, the guy shoots the bird over his dog, and he wants his dog to retrieve it, but the other guy's dog beats the dog to retrieve. And then, you have a little situation on your hands. So we I had to call the lodge manager and find another guide to come out quickly and take the other group. So,
oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say too, because is that fairly unique when people are allowed to bring their own hunting dogs? I would imagine that people try to facilitate that, but I've been around my friends hunting dogs enough to know that what one person thinks is a well-behaved dog in the field is not what another person thinks is a well-behaved dog in the field.
Yeah, that's right. Now that was in Kansas. In South Dakota, we do allow customers to bring their own dogs. Typically, they'd be in a group by themselves, and these smaller groups have the option. Like if it's under 4 people, they're probably going to be grouped up with a smaller group, but they have the option to pay a fee to get their own guide for the duration of their trip. So if there's like 2 groups, it's not ideal to have, someone else running their dog. I'd rather be running my dogs. But we do allow people to bring their dogs out. And yeah, you're right. Everybody loves their dog. And, we have a little joke at the lodge that, like, as soon as somebody tells us they have a field trial champion, we get pretty worried because they bring them out in the field. That's no field trial champion.
I had a theory. I started catching on to it when I was pretty young, and it was when I would be skiing. And if somebody was telling you how amazing they were on skis, you could almost bet that every single time you were going to get out there, that the person was going to be just chaos on the mountain. And it transitioned to, fishing and hunting too. If somebody's telling me how many animals they've killed and brag about it nonstop, it's like, you probably don't even know how to track. Like, you get into those people overcompensate and try to sell themselves so hard. And it's like, oh no, I already know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you're doing this, when you're going out and you decided that the guiding was for you, and it was enough for you for 9 years, and that's, I mean, like, that's a good stretch in a field like that. How many places did you work? You mentioned living out of a suitcase. Over those 9 years, how many different lodges did you work for?
So a typical year for me, So at the lodge that I work at in South Dakota, we have a preserve. There's a preserve season, and some of our land is in preserve. We have like over 3,000 acres. Plus, we lease out a lot of ground. Um, so if you put your land in preserve, you can start hunting earlier than um, the average season, than your wild bird season, and it extends past the wild bird season. So we would start hunting September 1st, or we could legally start hunting September 1st, but out there it's just so brutally hot that, we tried to wait till mid to late September to start running hunts because the dogs can't handle that heat. But we'd run hunts until about Christmas time. I'd come back to Georgia and I guided a place called Burge Plantation. It's a private quail club. I'd guide there for 3 months. And when I first started guiding, I ran a striper fishing guide service on Lake Hartwell in South Carolina. So I would do that April through August, and then it was back out to South Dakota. But I did that for 4 years, and then I started doing habitat management for the lodge during the summertime. But during the spring, I would run conservation snow goose hunts in South Dakota. So just kind of bouncing around all over the place. But
so you're bouncing from South Dakota, starting in Kansas, right? Then you go to South Dakota, Georgia, South Carolina.
That's right. Yeah.
And then back to South Dakota. And you're doing this on like a 3-4 month rotation?
Yep. I was, all over the place. I would just trying to fit, it's hard being a guide because, it's seasonal. So trying to find something you can do, like when I'm guiding pheasant hunt September through December, then I was like, how am I going to make money these other months? So, and it's hard to like start a so-called regular job and tell them like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to be gone these 3 months out of the year. So
right.
Started guiding quail hunts, and then I've always loved striper fishing. So I decided to jump into that, start a guide service striper. And then I love South Dakota so much. I just decided to start staying out there, and, we'd run some walleye trips. But just really getting the ranch ready for the season, just planting and getting food plots ready and deer stands. And I ran conservation snow goose hunts, for the spring season. And the dates varied for that, just based on the weather. Like, was it 2 years ago? I had the whole season booked up. Me and my business partner had the whole season booked up, and the snow, it was the craziest spring I've ever seen out there. We had so much snow, which the snow geese, they've already migrated down to Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, and we're waiting on that snow to melt for them to push their way back to Canada to the breeding grounds. And it's great to have those snow geese, they'll stay south of the snow line. So, but we had snow every field, just feet of snow. Those snow geese were going to stay south until that melted because they got no open water to drink, no fields to feed in. And then, so I had to call all of our customers and say, hey, we're going to have to push you back a month. I can give you a refund, or we can push it back a month, and we're just waiting on the snow geese to show up. They're in Arkansas right now. So
the weather changes, you don't have work.
That's right. Yeah, you really have to be mobile during snow goose season. Because sometimes like they were held south so long during that season that by the time the snow melted, they were eager to get back to the breeding grounds, in the tundra of Canada. And by the time the snow melted, they pushed through so quickly. The season was super short unless you follow the migration north. But
so the life of a guide is nomadic. One, you're bouncing from state to state with the seasons and the animals. And you got like 3 months in one state, then you're across the entire country to another place.
Yeah.
Trying to sub in some fishing. and then along the lines, like you're weather dependent. So if weather messes with migrations, you got nothing to do. And so I mean, it's like it is a very temperamental, I'll say. It's it's definitely like it's the labor of love of that you like that's it, right? Like that's you're performing the task because you love it.
That's right.
Which keep in mind, I think that's like I'm hoping that that's kind of a wake up to anybody that hires a guide, right? Like tip your guides.
Yeah.
Like that's
I mean,
that is extremely important, right?
those most of those guides out there, they want to kill birds more than the customer does. I mean, they want every hunt to be successful, and it's, you gotta deal with whatever Mother Nature hands you. But you know, it's very weather dependent. I mean, everybody wants to be a guide until, like snow goose season, we're putting out 2,000 decoys with e-collars, setting up layout blinds, brushing in A-frames. It's long days. I mean, we're getting maybe 4 hours of sleep every night for 30, 40 days straight. So
Oh,
it's a
okay.
grind.
So also not sleeping.
That's right. Because I mean, at the end of the hunt, you're cleaning birds, and you know that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So as you started doing this, you started getting into habitat and land management just by proxy of what you're doing. You've got to expand how, I guess, your value to the outfit, because if you're just hunt guiding, then you go out on the hunt and you're done. Was that just a way to get more income, kind of diversify your knowledge set?
Yeah, it was. I just wanted to be in South Dakota, pretty much full time. I became a resident there. So yeah, it was just kind of a way to bring in more income, and really taught me a lot. Just we're getting all of our food plots ready. Just there's a lot of preparation for pheasant season. It's a lot of planting, a lot of spraying. We've a lot of our land is in CRP, which so just maintaining that. You have thistle that comes up all over the place. You got to spray that and take care of that, or you'll get fined. If
Oh
you
yeah.
so it's a lot of work, but I enjoyed it.
So now that you specialized in upland country, so what makes you mentioned planting for pheasants? So what's sort of your ideal habitat for pheasant, and how do you maintain it?
So there's most we're like the only pheasant hunting operation in that area, really. So like everyone else, all the farmers are playing a different game than us. We're leaving our crop up where those guys are harvesting. So the day that they harvest, the amount of wildlife we get on our property, the only cover that's left, everything surrounding us gets harvested. That is the best day of the year for pheasant hunting, because those cornfields hold so many birds, so many whitetail, and they all push onto our property, because we leave our habitat up. But as far as planting for pheasant goes, you got to have grain. Like if I'm going to go hunt public lands, I'm looking for CRP, native grasses that border grain fields. So we plant the way we'll hunt differently with bigger groups than we do small groups. I mean, we have such a diverse habitat. Just we've got cedar belts, plum thickets, a lot of sloughs. For those that don't know, a slough is like a pond with swampy cattails all around it. We've got corn, millet, sorghum, beans, a little bit of everything for the pheasants. So in South Dakota, road hunting is legal, which I'm not a huge fan of, but those pheasant in the morning, they'll once they come off the roost, they'll go eat gravel, to help digest their food. So they'll come to the public roads, and you can't legally start hunting till 10 a.m. for pheasant, which, usually those pheasant are hitting those ditches before then, but we like to put a lot of gravel on our properties. We have gravel roads. We'll put piles of gravel all over the place just to try and keep those pheasant from going to the roads. But we set it up where we'll have, for big groups, we'll have big corn strips, and we plant millet or beans in between the corn strips, and we'll harvest the beans before we start hunting it. But a bunch of corn strips side by side. We'll cut the millet, and we'll leave strips of millet on the edge and at the end as kind of a buffer to hold those pheasants in. Because if you just have a big corn strip there, I mean, they'll just come running right out of that strip so quick. But for a big group, you know, we'll set up and send blockers around to hold those birds in, and we'll strategically do that because, I mean, pheasant are smart. Like, they don't, like, you have a blocker walking right next to that corn strip that they're about to block, those pheasant are going to run out the end before they even reach the end of that strip. So, and then I'll go through the middle of it with my dogs, and we'll have flankers on each side. We'll have, you know, if we have a group of 8, I'll have 2 blockers and 3 flankers on each side, and we'll space everybody out about 40, 50 yards. So that way, like, as I'm pushing through the corn, they push down as well. A bird gets up, if it flies between 2 guys, they've each got a 25-yard shot. And, you know, that corn's nice and tall, so it's a safer way to hunt because those birds have to get up nice and high. You're not taking low shots. If the bird is staying low, you wait till it gets out of that rectangle that you've created with your hunters, and then everybody can turn and shoot, you know, safely. With the sorghum strips, we'll kind of do the same thing, but we'll kind of set those up for smaller groups and plant millet all through, but all between it. Once that millet dries out before season starts, we'll come through and bush hog it and just have tons of food for those pheasants. So yeah, we'll plant a bunch of switchgrass. Those cedar belts, like late season, the cedar belts are just unbelievable, especially if you have a snow, like that's where you want to hunt. So plum thickets, cedar belts, sloughs.
So the blockers that you would set up, are those customers or are those other guides?
Those are customers.
Okay, I was going to say, I could imagine like you go out and you're a hunting guide and then you're like, what'd you do for the day? I walked along the perimeter back and forth all day. Like, that was my job. Yeah. But it's so you get them to participate and block in and then rotate in as a shooter, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and those blockers a lot of the times, like, you know, sometimes they'll get most of the shooting.
Oh, okay. So you did set them up to shoot as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're facing, as we're kind of pushing down with our rectangle. You know, I've got a guy to my left, a guy to my right, and they walk outside. Our customers walk on the path outside of the corn. I'm weaving through the corn.
So they're not even going through the bushes.
No, a lot of those lodges, you know, they will, but I don't like my customers to do that because when you're hunting in corn that's 10, 12 feet tall, or, you know, it's hard to get a shot off. So if they're hunting on those edges, me and my dogs can cover that entire corn strip weaving back and forth. So I want those guys out in the path, plus, you know, less of a tripping hazard holding a firearm. So, but yeah, we just space those guys out. And as I push down the corn, they push down and maintain their 50-yard gap or so. And once we push all the way down to the blockers, you know, a lot of times you'll have a big flush of all those birds you've been pushing down the whole way, you know, and then everybody gets some shooting. So.
Did you rely on wild birds or were these planters?
So as a preserve, you legally, like the game warden will come and check our records. You legally have to release 1 bird for every bird you kill. So, you know, if we kill 6,000 birds at the end of the season, we legally have to release 6,000 for the next season. So we do release a lot of birds, but we do kill wild birds on every single hunt. And if we have a lot of guys that, you know, they will only want to hunt wild birds, we have properties where we're able to do that we don't release birds. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was going to say, do you run into wild bird syndrome where like you got spooky wild bird, sorry, planter bird syndrome is what I meant to say. Because like normally you got wild birds and they're a little sketchy. Like they'll fly out on you and they do the thing, but then you got the planters that will like stay huddled up in a ball until you step on them.
Yeah. And, a lot of the guys are surprised. Like some guys come out and hunt and, we tell them it's a preserve to buy a preserve license, but they think they're hunting purely wild birds because our birds fly so well. Like, especially the birds that have been out there a while. I mean, they might as well be wild.
They
Some of
get
those
savvy. Okay.
they do, but the birds that have been released recently, you can definitely tell. Like they hold a lot tighter. Sometimes the dogs in the grass will point, and be right on them, and that bird's not going to move until that dog's nose is right on his tail. So
I had an inexperienced dog and I was out with my family at a wildlife management area hunting pheasants and my dog went into point and just nothing was happening. And I was like, well, like, and I gave her a commit. I had her just like go a little bit further. Like she'd give a creep and she'd give a creep and I'd whoa her up, and she would like just hold up on this bush and nothing was flying. So I was just kind of like, I don't know, get whatever's there. And she like jumps in and grabbed a pheasant by the head and brought it alive over to me. And it was one of those like, that's not how that's supposed to go. Yeah, I've seen the planners do that and hold tight.
yeah.
So how often does it get sketchy with clients where they've got a firearm?
Uh, it not too often, really. I mean, so in our sorghum strips, we plant millet, sorghum with on the sides we'll have Sudan grass or Egyptian wheat, which is very tall.
Yes.
So the reason we do that, I mean, it's good habitat, but we do that if the birds in that strip, it forces them to get up nice and high like they do in the corn.
You're making
So
sure people are raising up high before they shoot kind of thing.
that's right. Yeah, because if you're just hunting a straight up sorghum field and there's, it's waist high or so, those birds, especially a wild bird, they're going to get up low and I always, we give a very detailed safety speech. You want to be shooting at sky. Um, you know, I worry for the dogs because, they're right on those birds.
Yeah.
So it just kind of forces those birds to get up nice and high. As a guide, everybody wants to be a guide but there is some risk to it. I mean, you've got a lot of guys out there that the way they've just have some unsafe techniques, that you have to correct. And
they're out there flagging you and
that's right. Cradle carrying every time they turn, your barrel's flagging and it's the new hunters, honestly, they don't scare me as much because they are willing to listen to you and learn. And, they're more hesitant to shoot at a bird where these guys, not all of them, but some of these guys that are or been doing it a long time, they don't want to listen to what you have to say as much because they're kind of stuck in their ways and you have to correct them and tell them, all it takes is one mistake, so you're going to keep that barrel pointed up with the safety on until you're ready to shoot. I've seen multiple dogs shot. Hate to see it. I've personally been shot in the head.
You got shot in the head?
I did. When you're guiding a group of 8 guys, 10 guys, you can't keep eyes on everybody all the time. So yeah, I was guiding out in Kansas and guy shot a bird. My dog went to retrieve it. And my dog's running up to me. I bent down to grab the bird and next thing I know, got shot in the back of the head. And the guy had an over under. He had, he's the one that shot the bird and he was reloading. And when he closed his barrel, he had his barrel pointed right towards me. And he was about 15 yards away. So luckily I only took 2 pellets out of the 174 or so in a number 5 lead shot. But yeah, it was a close call. I'm lucky to be here. So
yeah, that's got to make sure that they know how and like making sure they know how to run their firearm, right? Like if you're going to reload it, like get the barrel away from people.
That's right. And it's a guy that's been hunting his whole life, and it's muzzle awareness, muzzle awareness. If you close that barrel, it better be pointed away from everybody and from the dogs. It's easy to turn to the side and close it. There's no need to close it and point it right at dogs or other people. So,
How is that situation handled? Like
well,
is he out? Like you just kick him out? Like you're gone, get out of here? Or
well,
how? What do you do at the end of that?
your head bleeds so much that like it hit me hard. So I was like, I immediately felt my head and there's a lot of blood. So I didn't know how bad it was. So, we're over an hour from any hospital. The first thing I did was like a guy gave me a glove to hold on to my head or, try and stop the bleeding. I got my dogs, threw them in my truck immediately. Luckily, we weren't that far from my truck. Um, and I was just like, I need the fastest driver to drive me to the hospital right now. So one
So
of the guys,
there was no handling of it on your end. It's just get out of there.
I was like, yeah, I'm getting out of there. Your hunt's obviously over at this point. We're about halfway through the hunt. So I went to the hospital and luckily I only took 2 pellets. And, it's kind of crazy when you show up to the hospital, you got like 2 game wardens, 2 police officers, like 5 doctors and
Oh
nurses.
man.
You and like, kind of freaks you out a little bit, but wasn't as bad as it could have been. So I was back guiding the next day.
Right, right. But I mean, so and that's another thing to keep in mind, right? Like, when you're out there, especially so if you're with a guide that involves shooting, like the guide's actually putting their life on the line a little bit. Like you take the wrong situation, the wrong circumstance, the wrong hunter, and it could go bad very fast. So
That's
it's one of
right.
those like, and again, tip your guides.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's, and from what I've noticed, a lot of the hunting accidents happen like when you're not in the act of hunting. Like this guy was reloading his gun. If you're like standing around trying to get everybody set up, people lean their gun down to go to the restroom for a second or whatever it may be. Like that's where you have to really be careful because usually in the act of hunting, everybody's waiting to shoot at high birds. You do got to yell at guys every now and then for shooting at a low bird, but the way we set up our cover, it's even our CRP grasses, like they're super tall. Shoulder height. Those birds have to get up nice and high a lot of the time. So
So the accidents happen when people are not thinking about the act of hunting and they just kind of absent-mindedly do something with the firearm.
yeah,
Gotcha. So I want to jump into this a little bit too. So in the conversation was geared towards, people who have thought about guiding and getting some information out there for those that are curious about what guiding entails. But you have recently moved into land sales.
I have.
Tell me, how did you decide that? And sort of where you are and what you're targeting and who you're working with.
So I am licensed in Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. I'm kind of in that pocket of South Carolina in the upstate where I'm very close to Georgia and very close to North Carolina. So
wait, you jumped in. You just got into this and you're already licensed in 3 states?
I am.
You put in work.
Yeah. I've just, growing up in North Carolina and going to NC State, I have a lot of connections there. Got a lot of family and I guide at the private quail club in Georgia. So I have a lot of connections there. And then I live in South Carolina. So I didn't want to have to miss out on any opportunities that were thrown my way. But I've just always had a passion for land and, I've already, shown a few, had a buyer. He's looking for a turkey hunting property. So it was pretty cool to take a guy out looking solely for a hunting property. That's kind of my expertise. So it's just.
So are you going through, so like you're working with a buyer, you're going through and evaluating the turkey hunting property. Are you are you sort of giving advisory on like, okay, this will hold turkey, this isn't going to hold turkey, that kind of thing? Or are you just kind of letting them sort of judge their own kind of assessment on that?
Both. A lot of, some of these guys are looking for hunting properties. They're pretty experienced themselves, but I'm definitely advising them throughout the process. We're looking for tracks, looking for turkey droppings, whatever it may be, turkey feathers. One of the properties we looked at recently was just completely overrun by hogs, just rooted up everywhere. Like all the food plots were rooted up. So we decided to stray away from that one. So
It is kind of different with land. It's when you're a lot of times in real estate, like if you're working in residential sales, right, and you're touring with a buyer, like they don't want to say a whole lot because they want the person to kind of decide, do I like the house? And with land, a lot of the times it's an advisory like, okay, your intent is to hunt whitetail. So here's my advice. This isn't going to hold anything. Or if it does, they're going to come through here and there's not going to be a lot of usage out of this land over. There's a lot of advisory that is almost against the interest of someone who is working with, where you would think about real estate as sales, like you're trying to sell the property. It's more reliant on the customer. And with land sales, it's a lot of advisory on, okay, this is what I would do to improve it. It's a very you're there to advise the customer, be there in their best interest, right? Like it's a different dynamic.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
so
you're just as much an advisor as you are an agent. So
yeah, so and then in your areas specializing a lot, and I'm guessing a lot of deer hunting. You got turkey, you got quail. What's sort of the main thing that people are looking for out there?
um, there's definitely a lot of deer hunters.
I was gonna say it's probably
Um,
primarily deer.
yeah, we don't have the quail that we used to, so like you don't see too much of that. I did have a guy that he runs like pen raised quail hunts, so he was looking for a property that he could set up for that.
Just hold,
But
yeah.
yeah, so and you set up those pen raised properties a little bit different than you would wild habitat. But yeah, just a lot of deer hunters, turkey hunters, deer everywhere, but finding a good turkey property is tough. Like you've got certain areas where you have good populations of turkey. So it's tough finding a good turkey property.
Yeah, and that's I mean, we do regular podcasts with Turkeys for Tomorrow, and their specialty is working with private landowners on turkey populations and helping helping populations grow. And that's sort of a nationwide thing right now is turkey decline. And in areas that used to hold them don't. And then a great area for turkey, as with all hunting, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters what your neighbors do. So if they're cutting their grasses early and stuff like that, you're going to have trouble keeping a turkey population in there. It's sort of a nationwide thing right now, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I listened to the podcast with what's his
Jason?
name? Chamberlain, Mike
Oh,
Chamberlain.
Mike Chamber. No, that was Mike is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, that guy knows more about turkeys than anybody. But yeah, I've listened to quite a few of his podcasts, and to hear like I'm a big turkey hunter. Me and my friends go on turkey trips across the country every year. But I never thought about it till I heard him say it. But like when you're turkey hunting early season, he's like, don't kill that big strutter that comes in. Kill if you have a bunch, three toms come in, don't kill the strutter, kill the subordinate bird that's kind of hanging back, because you kill that strutter, you're going to mess up the entire pecking order. And for them, that's that bird that's breeding all these hens, where if you kill him, those toms have to fight it out and establish who's the dominant bird now, and that takes time. So you're really, if it's your private land, you're really fighting yourself in the foot if you do that. So I thought that was really interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah, because he talks about like how the subordinates will spot weakness in the older one, the strutter that's out there, and you take that one down, and they'll go and try to beat it up while it's there on the ground. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's immediate. Like they key in, like, oh, it's my time.
that's
And
right. Yeah.
that messes up the dynamic. So yeah, so you are in South Carolina, Georgia, and what was the third state?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, North Carolina and South Carolina. You're keeping busy. Obviously, with 9 years of experience hunt guiding and doing habitat management throughout South Dakota, Kansas, and South Carolina, you know your thing or two about managing the land there. You know, as a new land agent, welcome to it. And you know, obviously you got the qualifications to make a career out of this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. I've enjoyed it so far, and you know, everybody at my office is awesome. Shout out to Edward Weathers for just always being so willing to help and give advice. So,
Oddly enough, I'm recording a podcast with Edward tomorrow.
okay, awesome.
He's got an old historical property we're talking about.
Oh yeah,
Awesome, man. Taylor, appreciate your time, man. It's a good conversation, and thank you for the insight in the conversation, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me out.
Definitely. All right, take care.
Take care, Mac.
This concludes episode 103 for the National Land Realty Podcast, covering the journey from hunting guide to land sales with Taylor Heithold of South Carolina and Georgia. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com. And don't you forget, podcast at nationalland.com. Give us your questions, tell us the topics that you want us to cover, and tell us the guests that you want to hear from. Thank you again for another wonderful episode, and we will see you next time.